Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm Yori Folani, and well, I'm alongside my colleague this morning, Hilary Nnoruka, who is one of our editors. Good morning, Hilary.
Good morning.
Yesterday was the 2017. That's the
72nd.
the 2017 edition of the General Assembly addresses, and the 72nd, of course, opened up by President Donald Trump, who had said that he was welcoming the world to his home ground, New York City. And interesting, the theme of the UN General Assembly addresses this year, focusing on people, striving for peace and decent life for all on a sustainable planet. Well, President Trump certainly be the first to speak. You know, he went to town. First of all, the general tone of President Trump's speech, you probably noticed, Hillary, that was as, well, so one of the diplomats called it bombastic, you know.
Yeah, it actually was. It was bombastic because apart from the different things he said, he really wanted to get to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. You know, North Korea, there's been tension in the Korean Peninsula between North Korea on one hand and then Japan and South Korea on the other hand, which everybody actually says that the North Korean leader has been poking at the United States. Because I think the aim of North Korea is to build a missile that can travel as far as the American coast, that can reach the United States, and Trump has been talking tough.
He certainly has been talking tough, and he used it arguably. He used the fact that he was the very, very first speaker as the host nation. He used it to further his domestic agenda. Don't forget that he was bringing in his campaign theme, America First, and he brought that onto a world stage where, well, if you look at it, every man there, every head of government, every president there had to go on probably and say, now, this is my world view, whoever you are. And that seemed to be the thrust of Trump. Diplomatese, he seemed to put it to one side and say, wait a minute, this is Donald Trump that you all know. Donald Trump that became the president of the U.S. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump, this is how I see it. It shall be America first, America first, America first. But all of you other heads of government here, go and do likewise. Put your country first. What do you think of that particular strategy and the tone of that particular message?
Okay, exactly. I think it's actually brought a kind of division and into this year's United Nations General Assembly. Now, you take a look at the theme we talked about, focusing on people. You know, for the first time in a long while, the General Assembly didn't have any particular focus. If you realize in previous times, and there was a focus on gender equality, then on a particular year, I can't remember when, was it 2 years ago, or some years back, it was the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes.
But this year, diplomatic experts actually say that the reason why the theme is broad, focus on people, is because
striving for peace and decent life for all on a sustainable planet.
Yes, it's because everybody has been waiting on Donald Trump to actually notify the world of what the United States wants.
Yeah, what his policies, his foreign policy is going to be like, what his worldview is going to be like. And well, arguably, he set a very, very different kind of a pace and a tone. In a long time, we haven't heard that kind of language from high-ranking diplomats, I mean from presidents and high-ranking diplomats. In fact, in the whole diplomatic circle, calling out world leaders by name, calling countries, murderous regimes, the Rocket Man, it was just, it was almost a spectacle. But we are probably more concerned with what our president said. Nigeria was represented. How good a job do you think we did in terms of putting across our world view, or how we want to be perceived, or this is Nigeria for you. This is what we hold dear. This is what we want. What did you get out of our president's speech?
Okay, now President Buhari's speech was straight to the point, just about 11 minutes long. He's known to be a man of few words, and he actually just had few words there. He basically, of course, touched on global issues, on North Korean issue. He touched on all of that.
Okay, let's take a look. We have the president. Okay, let's listen. Let's listen a bit.
Our faith in democracy remains firm and unshaken. Our regional organization, ECOWAS, came together to uphold democratic principles in the Gambia as we had done previously in Côte d'Ivoire. Through our individual national efforts, state institutions are being strengthened to promote accountability and to combat corruption and asset recovery. These can only be achieved through the international community cooperating and providing critical assistance and material support.
Okay, interesting. The president's talking about, needed material support from the Committee of Nations. It seemed almost like the direct opposite of what President Trump in his opening speech was, sort of preaching. He seemed to be emphasizing on the fact that, look, America has not got that good a deal over time, 190-something countries in the UN. America, I think he said, pays more than 22% of the bill, sort of sending out a note that, everybody's got to have to sort of pick up their own tab as we go along. But wait a minute, we have a strategy expert, Yemi Makwadirun, also on the line. And good morning, Yemi.
Good morning, Yori. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for calling in. Great, thank you. You watched the addresses yesterday, as many as you could, but I'm sure you wouldn't have missed the opening and then our president's speech. Now, going quickly to our president now, what did you come away with after our president delivered his speech? Where do you think the emphasis is on in terms of what the president wants Nigeria to be seen as, standing for?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I listened to the president's address at the UN, General Assembly, the 72nd edition, and I must say that quite a few Nigerians may have been a bit surprised that the president did not focus a great deal on domestic issues in Nigeria. But that can be gleaned from the theme of this year's General Assembly. And so I imagine that the president's speechwriters decided to focus more on the theme of this year's General Assembly and then build a speech around that. Although the president, as usual,
also on the line. And good morning, Yemi.
Good morning, Yori. How are you doing?
Thank you very much for calling in. Great, thank you. You watched the addresses yesterday, as many as you could, but I'm sure you wouldn't have missed the opening and then our president's speech. Now, going quickly to our president now, what did you come away with after our president delivered his speech? Where do you think the emphasis is on in terms of what the president wants Nigeria to be seen as, standing for?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. I listened to the president's address at the UN, General Assembly, the 72nd edition, and I must say that quite a few Nigerians may have been a bit surprised that the president did not focus a great deal on domestic issues in Nigeria. But that can be gleaned from the theme of this year's General Assembly. And so I imagine that the president's speechwriters decided to focus more on the theme of this year's General Assembly and then build a speech around that. Although the president, as usual, made an appeal, to the global community in terms of assisting Nigeria to recover, illicit funds or illicit funds from the country. But I think, like a CNN report put it, the president actually spoke more like the president of Africa than the president of Nigeria.
Indeed, I get where you're going there because Hillary, you also, do you agree with that?
Yes, exactly, because at a particular point in time, he talked about ECOWAS, and he was really speaking as an ECOWAS representative.
Or African Union as well.
Exactly.
You know, say that through the instrumentality of these offices, they would expect the United Nations to take an active role in bringing about the goal of the theme, that is the people.
Yes, because particularly he actually talked about the collaboration between Nigeria and other West African states in checking money laundering and fighting corruption.
Indeed.
So really, just like he said, the president spoke as the president of Africa.
Yeah, as the African president. Yemi, you're still there. I don't know. What did you think of the, the lead, shall I say, the first speaker, the tone set by the first speaker, subsequently followed by our president? And that meant about the president speaking perhaps more for Africa than for the domestic audience. He even weighed in on the things like the Iran nuclear deal, for instance. You know, that as you know, at the very top, the U.S. president has said he wasn't too excited about, and everybody seems to be warning that, look, be careful there. If you go tear that deal up, the problem is that America will hardly ever be trusted again, because if something is done in one administration, the next administration comes along and tears it up. Well, our president also lent his voice to that particular issue, saying that it was appreciable progress. He didn't exactly comment on what had gone before him, but he was in support of some of the things that the president of the U.S. seemed not to be most enamored of.
Yes, you're very correct. Like I said, you know, the broad theme of this year's General Assembly defined the direction of most of the world leaders' speech. But nobody should be surprised, really, that Mr. Trump, being the president of America, decided to come with a different agenda, which is actually also to address some of the pressing threats, you know, to global peace and to American interests. But having said that, I think generally we should understand that the United Nations General Assembly is a platform for discussing global issues and not domestic issues. And there is no way that any speech can encapsulate everything that, you know, a country will want to see done by the United Nations. And so the focus this year, you know, has to really be, you know, on the people, global peace, sustainable development,
Indeed.
and so on and so forth, which is actually in line with the new developmental agenda of the United Nations, which is, you know, sustainable development. You know, after the expiration of the Millennium Development Goals era.
Indeed.
But the truth be told, that the United Nations General Assembly also provides an opportunity for countries to play up those issues that are of particular importance, you know, to them. And I think doing a critical analysis of Mr. President's speech, it does appear to me that we did not maximize the opportunity that that platform provided, unless, of course, he has a time limit within which he has to deliver his speech.
Well, indeed, one doesn't know about, but as you said, Trump took about 40-something minutes, 42, 47 minutes. Our president, much less than that, you know, much less than that. But as you say, Yemi, focusing on the theme, it is focusing on people, striving for peace and decent life for all on a sustainable planet. And, well, as Yemi pointed out, it's usually about global issues, but it's probably also, you could also use it to sort of indicate how you would like to be perceived in that whole committee of nations and where your interests would lay. Now, President Trump was very, very clear on that. He said it as many times as almost as when he was on the campaign trail, America first. So he's interpreted, if not reinterpreted, the theme of this year's theme for the United Nations General Assembly. He's taking it, focusing on people, striving for peace and decent life for all on a sustainable planet. I got the impression that his message was that we're not going to teach you how to run your lives. We're not going to teach you what kind of a system to adopt. No, no, no. If that was happening in the past, forget it for now. But I expect you to also be likewise. Go and do likewise. Don't tell anybody what to do. Just do what's best for your people. He talked about this. In fact, his speech was a nationalistic kind of a speech. And people are wondering, where's all this sovereign thing, patriotism? Why is it coming? But let's hear Mr. President, the U.S. President. Let's hear him.
North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. It is an outrage that some nations would not only trade with such a regime, but would arm, supply, and financially support a country that imperils the world with nuclear conflict. No nation on earth has an interest in seeing this band of criminals arm itself with nuclear weapons and missiles. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
Now, our president also said some things that would align with the position of the U.S. president, but no way, shape, or form was it said in the way that he said it.
None at all.
Our president remained, he adopted the classic model of diplomacy, tact, refinement of language, and all of that. Even if he agrees very much with some of the sentiments that it's a very dangerous issue, this whole nuclear game that is being played out.
Yeah, actually, everybody, the international community believes it's actually dangerous what North Korea is doing, and surprisingly, even Russia and China. But China's position is actually that the United States shouldn't use force. But Donald Trump, if you look at quite a number of analysis, expert analysis, I think Donald Trump probably would have used force if not for his top advisors. A particular Democrat in the United States...
he has to persuade Congress to allow it.
Exactly. Yeah, a particular Democrat in the United States was actually very grateful. What's the name of Donald Trump's? I can't remember exactly the name of Donald Trump's defense secretary, but he was actually happy that the defense secretary is still there, because according to him, the defense secretary is the person who keeps Donald Trump sane. If not, Donald Trump probably would have done something drastic. Yeah, just like you said, he's always had these nationalistic tendencies right from the day, right from last year when he was campaigning to become president up until now. He believes in just America first. And that actually has been a source of friction between him and some other countries. If you look at France, Emmanuel Macron also coming to the United Nations General Assembly for the first time, just like Trump. He's been actually preaching multilateralism. So let's just wait and see the shape of things after the end of the United Nations General Assembly this year, to see if everybody is actually going to toe Donald Trump's line, or if we are all going to see what we saw during Obama's time, when Obama was trying to cut deals with virtually every nation on earth.
Well, there's going to be a lunch meeting today. Our president is one of the African leaders that will be at that lunch meeting. So probably they'll also chat informally, around lunch. Well, as informally as heads of state sort of chat, even in their own level of informality, there still will be some substance in there. We'll see how all of that goes. But Yemi Makpadirun, when he was speaking, was bemoaning what he felt as an opportunity perhaps to put us, to cast in perhaps sharper relief what exactly we are about, without losing sight of the fact that yes, it's a world stage, but what better stage really than to say that this is what Nigeria stands for. Yeah, he did, well, the president said, our president said that democracy and rule of law is thriving and expanding in Africa. That was an interesting point. Yeah. It is no doubt coming from his attitude and that of his administration and what they're trying to do, deepen democracy through the institutions, etc., and all of that. I think he sort of wanted to put that out there, that whatever way you've seen Nigeria before, it's a lot more transparent. It's a working process, but it's going to be a lot more transparent. The fight against corruption, the fight against terrorism. That our president also agreed with, by and large, the sentiments of Donald Trump on the war against terror and all of that. But then again, as I said, a much more reticent approach. No rocket man, no a la George Bush axis of evil and that kind of a thing.
Yeah,
he really shook up the
President
Trump's speech really shook up I would imagine, the diplomatic community, who are used to speaking in different tones. And then when you look at Netanyahu, when he came along, it's either that Netanyahu's speechwriters and the American president's speechwriters had seen each other's work, or they were there and were quickly revising their scripts as the American top dog was going about his own. But
don't forget that don't forget that 2 years ago when the Iran nuclear deal was about to be signed, that Netanyahu actually came to the United States unannounced. What I mean unannounced, you know, when heads of state visits, they notify the host head of state. But Netanyahu left Israel and was in the United States without his people notifying President Barack Obama. He actually went to the United States Congress and gave a speech. So Trump and Netanyahu are on the same page when it comes to the Iran nuclear deal. And I can actually also assume they're probably on the same page when it comes to North Korea. So it's not surprising that their speeches will look alike.
Yeah, well, okay. And then, but President Buhari, he also, you know, he took a dim view of, and it was a delicate issue perhaps, he took a dim view of Myanmar and what's going on there. You know, how soon, you know, Myanmar and their problems.
Rohingya refugees.
Yes. And he called a spade there. That, look, from all intents and purposes, the evidence on the ground, it's really looking like ethnic cleansing, and this should not be allowed. Again, speaking up for some of those values that we ourselves hold dear and that the president wants to see furthered, and also perhaps in a roundabout sort of a way, indicating the kind of things that we will not stand for here, and that is why he's also objecting when he sees it elsewhere and doing so on the international stage. So there's a way in which you can probably take a lot that the president says and then begin to work it out and see that, well, that was the subtle approach that he wanted to adopt. It was the classic kind of approach. It wasn't one of those kind of outings where I don't know that the president went out and was wanting to make one of those speeches that would, you know, become cast in gold.
Yeah,
it wasn't really one of those for the archives, but it was about, you know, going out there and doing the needful. But do you think enough was done to show how we are and what we're about and what our plans are, and generally how we should be seen?
Okay, like Yemi said, I think the president could have done more in actually putting forward what Nigeria needs at this time. Don't forget that before he left for the General Assembly, that a speech, that there was his spokesperson released a statement that the president was going to lay out this and this and this and that during his speech at the General Assembly. But something we didn't hear much about, that's about the call, especially for the rest of the Chibok girls who are still in captivity to be brought back home. So we're actually thinking that the president was going to hammer on about that and also talk more about the refugee situation back in Nigeria. Yes, he didn't mention that. He thanked the international community for support, but he didn't talk much about what he would want the international community to do about the situation with internally displaced persons back home in Nigeria. So yeah, he could have actually done a little bit more.
We have Professor Akinfeleye of the University of Lagos also on the line. Good morning, Prof, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
Thank you.
And excellent program.
Oh, very kind of you, Prof. Your impressions, Prof, the opportunity we had, that is Nigeria had through President Buhari to, as it were,
do about the situation with internally displaced persons back home in Nigeria. So yeah, he could have actually done a little bit more.
We have Professor Akinfeleye of the University of Lagos also on the line. Good morning, Prof, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
Thank you.
And excellent program.
Oh, very kind of you, Prof. Your impressions, Prof, the opportunity we had, that is Nigeria had through President Buhari to, as it were, you know, draw us out in relief, you know, against the backdrop of world leaders, each putting forward their perspective on the world and how their country interfaced with that world. What were the impressions you got from President Buhari yesterday?
Well, the first thing, first of all, is to congratulate Mr. President. This is his third outing, and he's there, direct and alive. I'm so proud of him, and the speech was so nice because he addressed the theme of the 72 session, basically on peace, security, and so on and so forth. And
in a
of
sustainable
course,
world.
he has established a position, that is Nigerian position of fighting corruption. And his advice to the more developed countries who are holding our money, who are cooperating with the corrupt people, that they should return our money. And I think it's an explanation and a strong position he took during the time that somebody, I think the former Prime Minister of London, of England, was saying that Nigeria is fantastically corrupt. And people ask the president to apologize. The president has no apology. What is he going to do with apology? He said, give me, return my money. I don't have apology. Return my money. Now, he's there to tell the world that we are also aware that these are collaborators. They should help repatriate our money that was stolen and keeping in their countries. And the second one is of equally interesting in the speech is the president's call and the support for and promise that democracy had come to stay.
Yes, and that it was expanding.
In Africa.
That the democracy and rule of law was expanding.
And then the other point that I listened to his speech is his appeal to the North Korean to take things easy and don't frustrate the international peace and order. I think it's a good submission, and I hope we re-emphasize this call during his sideline talks with everybody, especially with Mr. Trump.
Exactly. This afternoon, later on today, you know, when they will be meeting over lunch. Our president's measured kind of a presentation yesterday. You know, our president was measured. His delivery was more measured, much so than the opening president of the U.S., Donald Trump, who, quite frankly, the way he decided to go, it's almost like unprecedented in diplomatic circles, calling out foreign leaders and countries, you know, that kind of thing.
You know, this is the third attempt.
Yes.
That was the first attempt. The president has returned. He's not a new person to the United Nations, and he's coming for the third time, so he had to improve. So I was not surprised that he did talk forcefully. As a Democrat, talk forcefully as a leader in Africa, talk forcefully about his determination to fight corruption to a standstill. So I want to congratulate him and also his lieutenant that followed him. And we should give the president the support so that he can take us out of this system of absolute corruption, and then the judiciary, on the other hand, should also fast-track all those cases with them.
Indeed.
And so that we stop all these crises and international peace is guaranteed. And I'm happy that he mentioned that one.
Thank you.
Nigeria's position is there. I think it was a good brand, and he attempted to sell our country as others are selling their country. So I congratulate him, and also congratulate the speechwriters. This time around, the speech was very focused, and was comprehensive, was very relevant, and addressed the contemporary issues. So therefore, the speech, in my judgment, is, if I want to rate it, I would say is category 1.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Ralph Akifele of the University of Lagos. Appreciate your calling in. There you go. You know, high praise for the president's outing yesterday. At least now, you know, it's a continuing work. It's the third time, as was pointed out by the professor, that the president is going out in this way, and you know, our message will get better and better sort of presented in time, so that people sort of maybe appreciate, 1, where we're coming from, 2, what we're doing, and 3, where we need to be going. The president was very particular about terror and the fight against terror, and how we needed to take a pragmatic, a preemptive approach before all of the spillovers come into the Chad basin region. He was thanking the UN for sending visitors to the Chad basin to see things for themselves, assess them, and all of that is, the president was emphasizing cooperation, that we have cooperated in and will continue to cooperate in these kind of efforts. He cited Gambia, for instance, where we were, shall we say, instrumental in getting,
of course.
you know,
Jammeh.
Yes, to getting him to move. So this sort of, and the president had said that democracy and rule of law is sort of getting stronger roots and is indeed expanding. Well, I keep my fingers crossed on that one, that matter about expanding, because every day...
I think it is. I mean, since 1999 till now, how many years of unbroken democracy? I think we are getting better.
Okay. Mr. Hassan in Lekki, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Yori.
Thank you very much for calling in.
Good morning, Mr. Hillary in Noruka.
Oh, thank you. Welcome.
Please, it is high time we begin to appreciate ourselves as Nigeria, and we appreciate our leaders. I don't know the way people wanted the president to say it. Maybe they wanted Mr. President to say it in their own way, which is not possible, because the time constraint is there. And the way I heard Mr. President yesterday, and the way I see it, he was very precise and straight to the point. And he said it all about the appreciation of Nigeria to the effort of the United Nations towards the Sahel region, towards the Lake Chad, and towards the fight against insurgents in the northeastern part of Nigeria. And secondly, he mentioned the democracy has come to stay. We don't know the weight of democracy has come to stay. Democracy means freedom. It's not only voting. Democracy means the supremacy of law over the whole constitution. Democracy means a lot to us. It's about us and us and us. And he made one thing known to the whole world. He addressed the whole world by saying his fight against corruption is unshakable. And we knew the havoc wreaked by corruption on Nigeria and Nigerians. What do you expect from a president than what he said yesterday? We wanted things to be said in our own ways. And we are over 100 and something million people. And everybody is coming up with his own suggestion how Mr. President will say it. And secondly, about Mr. Trump, there was an adage in Hausa, a proverb in Hausa that says, "In Kajina Mudameshi." Whenever you hear people saying that this thing is for us, somebody must be in control of it. Trump came with that sagacity and arrogance to the United Nations, not minding the fact that the United Nations belongs to all. But what is very clear, let me refer you to what the former Chief of Army Staff of the United States said. He said, people tend to look at us and say to us that we cannot be the war policemen. But please guess who gets called when one needs a cop. And the same demonstration was what Mr. Trump came yesterday. He was emphasizing about America, emphasizing about the supremacy of firepower of America to quench what is happening in South Korea. Then Mr. President, our president, came up to added maturity into him by saying we should embrace dialogue first. Because in military tactics, Mr. Yori, war is the last resort. And we should appreciate our president for that.
Indeed.
Good morning, Mr. Yori. Good morning, Mr. Hillary Hilnoruka. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Al Hassan. Appreciate that contribution. And the president did also say, our president did also say to, to further what you were saying, Hassan, he did also say that, look, we have numerous talents in Africa, both man and woman. You know, everybody has their strengths. We have this, and that I noted that he said we're working hard to make sure that there should be that no person should be in the leadership saddle for an inordinate length of time. Mr. President put that out there. Again, that's probably within our own context a very, very statesman-like thing to say.
Yeah, that is.
All these what he was saying there was signing off that all these sit-tight kind of rulers in Africa, Nigeria doesn't support it. You know, people just hanging on. Unfortunately, we have that dubious reputation, shall we say, of having people who have been, they just sit down there forever. They just sit down there forever. But Mr. President said that, well, as far as we were with the new Africa, no man or woman should be in the leadership saddle for an inordinate amount of time, and that is the way Nigeria will be seen. Mazi, is Mazi on the line? Mazi Okoroafo, good morning, sir, in Arochukwu.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Mr. Allah. Good morning. You see, our president has said it all. You see, Iran nuclear deal and North Korea atomic bomb of mass destruction is a problem for the whole world. Thank God for our president on that issue of sustainable peace and development in Africa. It's a paramount importance for us, because look at what President Trump did. Talking, America, America, America. Before President Trump said, God bless everybody, God bless America, God bless America. That's exactly what our president also boils down to. Now, the question now is this. Our president has just emphasized that issue of corruption. That it is very, very important. If you take well, our Nigerian problem is that we are supposed to move forward based on this sustainable peace and sustainable development. You cannot sustain all these things without funds. How do we do that? If we recover all those things from outside, it will help us. Now, if you look at the Guinea president, what he said, contact. At the end of the day, you see that he himself that he had another issue today, but because of the circumstances, or before him or behind, he cannot move forward. So I thank God for the Nigerian president. He has tried it and we have done. What we do now, let Nigerians, after all this United Nations, let us come back and sit down. If they think that, let us find solutions to what we have in this country. Because Nigeria, if we see Nigeria as a country, see that what we have here, we have excess. But because all these excess are in the hands of 10% or 15%, then 80% are corporate. That is why you see Nigeria is facing a lot of problems. International community cannot come here and help us and survey this country. The only thing they will do, they will only advise us and tell us, it is not left for us here in Nigeria to sit down and find solutions or solutions. Because African solution or African problem needs African solution, not Oyibo man solution. Africa, we created a problem. Africa, we have to find solutions by ourselves. Thank you very much, Mr. Beli. Thank you. God bless you.
Indeed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mazi Okoroafo. So much so that the president actually said yesterday that the challenge is ours. President Buhari said that the challenge is ours and we accept the responsibility. As in the past, quoting him directly now, as in the past, we know that we all do well when we share our skills and expertise. So nobody has a monopoly of expertise. Everybody has something to contribute. Never mind how President Trump was sounding at the very, very beginning. Our president sort of tempered things a bit with, look, everybody has their own little assets and whatever, and nothing is too small to bring to the table. It's our challenge, we know. So all those speeches we heard about somebody paying an inordinate amount of the rent of the United Nations, be that as it is, we can sort all of these things out, but I don't know, imagine that in diplomatic circles, they would have been really thrilled about the way the president of the United States decided to go out yesterday. I
don't think they would have been thrilled. I don't think any leader would have been thrilled anyway. Maybe except for, well, maybe Netanyahu. I'm not sure.
Well, yes, exactly. he was smiling. He was good, and well, I believe they're trying to speak to us. Mr. Jonathan in Ikorodu, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Actually, I'm a first-time caller on this program.
Oh, we're glad to have you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ayuri, and thank you to Hillary. I was Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was watching the program when my president was speaking at the UN.
Yes.
I so much happy and I was so grateful for the speech of Mr. President. And I want to say briefly about corruption, which he has been fighting. I am so much grateful about him. Corruption itself started from the streets of Nigeria.
At the very beginning, our president sort of tempered things a bit with, look, everybody has their own little assets and whatever, and nothing is too small to bring to the table. It's our challenge, we know. So all those speeches we heard about somebody paying an inordinate amount of the rent of the United Nations, be that as it is, we can sort all of these things out, but I don't know, imagine that in diplomatic circles, they would have been really thrilled about the way the President of the United States decided to go out yesterday.
I don't think they would have been thrilled. I don't think any leader would have been thrilled anyway. Maybe, except for, well, maybe Netanyahu, I'm not sure.
Well, yes, exactly. he was smiling. He was good. And well, I believe they're trying to speak to us. Mr. Jonathan in Ikorodu, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Actually, I'm a first-time caller on this program.
Oh, we're glad to have you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Yuri, and thank you to Hillary. I was watching Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was watching the program when my president was speaking at the UN.
Yes.
I so much happy, and I was so grateful for the speech of Mr. President. And I want to say briefly about corruption, which he has been fighting. I am so much grateful about him. Corruption itself started from the streets of Nigeria. Corruption started from the house as a family. And fighting a corruption is not just a one day. The country that, because we have to give the president a time for this corruption to be settled once and for all. We know that it cannot just be settled for just even in 8 years. It cannot be beaten. It's a gradual process. Because I'm a political science student.
Okay.
So I know what a corruption hits how. When a corruption is hitting a country, this country is coming to destabilization. You know? So I so much commend the president to hitting out that this country, we all have to fight it to make sure we can have peace. So I will be grateful and just to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you very much, Mr. Jonathan. Yes, please.
So you already pointed about corruption.
Yes.
You know, I think in the subsequent meetings that President Buhari will have with other world leaders, I think he should try to actually build a coalition to fight corruption, because it's not something that Nigeria can tackle alone. It is an international conspiracy to this issue. Just don't forget that many treasury looters actually have companies registered in other domains, registered abroad. And most times when these corruption cases come up in foreign courts, the courts actually order that the monies embezzled from Nigeria be forfeited to the governments of those countries. So I think the president really should try as much as possible to discuss with other world leaders on how we can repatriate looted funds. It's something that really requires international collaboration.
And also our world view. The president, I noted, he spoke about what he referred to as a glaring unfairness. And an example of that, according to our president, was the Palestinian case. You know, he came out there. Mr. Netanyahu was there, the US president was there, and he came out and he said, look, this glaring unfairness, you know, has to be addressed because it, quoting the president now, diminishes our moral authority to preach and lecture the world on other cases if we're all busy looking away from that. This seems to be sort of vintage Buhari where, look, some things have to be said. It might not be what everybody wants to hear, but we're talking about morality here. We're talking about fairness here. And you can bring it right back into the war against corruption. In fact, the president has spoken his mind perhaps too clearly on some instances where I imagine some of his handlers would have been saying, Mr. President, did you go that far? Remember when he said back home here that My problem is the whole judiciary in this whole war against corruption. We're doing what we can, but I just don't know how to put it more delicate. My concern is the judiciary. And now here he's saying that we are leaving that moral issue there. It's a glaring unfairness. Palestinians are suffering, and we're busy here speaking grammar, whereas we know that the needful should be done. And then he didn't shy away from weighing in on the whole nuclear matter as well. He says that, look, it's a very, very delicate issue, and I think the president indicated that he doesn't see that there's that a military solution is what's going to sort this matter out. War, military solution, the escalating arms race. He spoke against it, very, very discreetly, very, very delicately, as people speak in international relations kind of a way.
Except a few people.
Yes, regular people.
Yes.
But I think President Trump was showing that, look, I'm President Trump. I'm Donald Trump that became President Trump. And, you know, I've never stepped in a civil service corridor in my life. And so this is the way I am. And this is the way America is going to be in as long as the people that put me here for one thing and one thing only, America first, America first, America first.
Interests and nothing else.
Nothing else. I mean, one needs to see how that kind of a world is going to, but I suppose these things will be moderated. But our president sort of, he did us proud, as everybody is saying, by putting those matters across, the matters that concern, quite frankly, the rest of the world and us.
He was really diplomatic.
Yes, yes, you know, in other words, no, he didn't upset any particular apple carts. If America had any, quote unquote, I don't know about enemies, but those who weren't exactly friends, well, President Trump didn't seem to care very much about that. I mean, when he says how did he phrase it? We would be forced to wipe out North Korea.
I mean, left alone to Trump, he probably looks like someone who would do just about anything. And don't forget that even back home during the election, I mean, he really just gave it out as he deemed fit.
Yes.
He actually has to be, I think in the White House, if not for some people who surround him, he probably would have gone to war with North Korea and done some very nasty things. But just like President Buhari said, and almost every other world leader has been saying, it's something that I believe can be solved diplomatically. North Korea has actually shown that it's trying to show that it's going to become a nuclear power. But also don't forget, Yori, that there are experts who actually say that the North Korean leader, now I'm not sure if this is true, they said that the North Korean leader doesn't really have any intention of firing any long-range missile that would land in the United States. They actually say that's, okay?
Oh, I'm sorry, there's a caller on the line. Sorry about that. Good morning.
Hello, Uncle Yori, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, sir. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Uncle Yori, for me, what I saw yesterday was gladdening in two respects. The American president sold their opportunity to Nigeria to lead the world yesterday, at least temporarily. When when our president saw that Donald Trump was exhibiting his usual characteristics at the world stage, if I were him, I would have gone off the script a little bit when it came to the area of talking about corruption fighting in Nigeria. When Donald Trump was a candidate, he was lambasting Nigeria. Britain was lambasting Nigeria. We are corrupt people. He will do this, he will do that, he will do that. Now we have a president that is fighting corruption. And Britain and America have been named as the main countries where these looted funds have been taken to. So it is time for our president to hammer it at the world stage that we want our money back. Please, the world, how can you help us to retrieve these monies? They are in Britain and America and in Dubai.
Exactly.
Be that as it may, his speech was, okay, what I would expect Nigerian government to do at this stage is to table this issue of looted funds at the Security Council and push it so that we can have a country like China and Russia to support us, because we know Britain and America will not support us. The funds are in their countries. We should take that step in order to retrieve our money.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling in, Mr. George. Interesting point that you make there. The Security Council, don't forget, did not escape Trump's criticism as well. He criticized just about every single body. Although he was careful when he came to Russia and he came to China, he trod lightly, very, very lightly, very, very softly. But even the United Nations Security Council itself, President Trump was not happy with it. He said that they were allowing people who to be members of that same council that they, you know, almighty America was a part of, and he didn't approve at all. He thought that they were too heavy on bureaucracy, so criticizing them all down the way, wanting almost like the Security Council, perhaps the UN, perhaps the world should operate as the Trump Business Organization. You know, he has his way.
But different, he was a civil, I mean, well, he was in the corporate world then,
yeah.
Now he's in government. So
yeah, he's
I think
in government
he just
now,
has to think like a president.
Yes.
And act like one.
But people are saying that, thank God for the way our president, as it were. Mr. George, I appreciate what Mr. George said, that, look, he wouldn't have minded if he had deviated a bit from the script when he got to certain areas, but it was enough. Our president's tone was going to be one of the classical approach. The president didn't feel a need between him and his speechwriters to upset any particular apple carts. I understand that there's another call. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning, Shikari.
Thank you for calling in, sir. Mr. Yakub.
Yeah, this is Yakub from Dokweman. And then good morning to your guest.
Well, my colleague, actually, Hillary.
Yeah,
Hillary Noruka.
Thank you. You see, Shikari, I want to talk about two leaders as an example this morning. There's one leader came to the podium yesterday speaking to the whole world and emphasizing being destroying the other country because he thought that they had another weapon more higher than the Korean one. Because you cannot just come to a podium, as your guest rightly said, and then you make the world know that if you allow to defend yourself, what you do next is to destroy another country. And then you are not talking about another leader. Those leaders talk before our leader in the presence of President Muhammadu Buhari, that none of them provide the solution to the issues. And then he came to the podium and then he gave the world the solution to it. By saying, my president, in the presence of the Secretary of the United Nations, I would advise that we should call on you by gathering some leaders within ourselves to send to that place for dialogue. So that when we dialogue to the Korean, we will know way forward. Rather than say that I'm going there to destroy a nation. That means you say somebody has a ballistic weapon. That tells me that you have another more higher ballistic weapon to destroy that nation. And then somebody has ballistic weapon that you say you must not have. And then you have. You don't want another state, another country to have the same thing. What is the justice in this? Thank you, God bless you.
Indeed, thank you very much. President Buhari said yesterday that we don't, I'm quoting him directly now, we don't aspire to have nuclear weapons in the continent of Africa, the cradle of mankind. We will preserve Africa in case the nuclear armed nations of the world that decide to destroy themselves in their so-called MAD. Mutually assured destruction that we do not desire. So again, sending out a pacifist kind of a message. Look, well, I suppose this is the world for you. Some people will be gung-ho. Some people will, you know, be as the U.S. president was, and then there will be other counterpoints. So in balance, people see that it takes all sorts to make up a family. In this case, a family of the world. I'm sure President Trump is going to, somewhere along the line, he has to necessarily moderate his views. I mean, he has to wipe out North Korea. You can't do that. Nobody can do that.
How can you?
But I imagine that he was just being President Trump to shake up the system a bit. Mindful, maybe it also needs to be said that it might have been very, very uncomfortable to listen to, but there were a few aspects of it that could not be faulted on fact. It's just that everything has a presentation. And maybe the presentation was what the world was most unused to.
Yeah, exactly. And President, like I was saying earlier, there are actually some international relations experts whose position is that Kim Jong-un just wants an opportunity to negotiate. He just wants an opportunity to sit down with the US and the rest of the world to actually bring out something that he wants from the world, and not necessarily to attack the United States or any other country.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, Hillary. We've got to leave it here. And thank you also for watching with us. Been looking at the President Muhammadu Buhari at the 72nd outing of the United Nations General Assembly, where our President delivered a pacifist message. Positive one. Most Nigerians are very, very happy with the way our President was something of a counterpoint to all sorts of bombastic speeches and put across the fact that we are in Africa here, democracy is thriving and expanding, and that's the way we intend to keep it. Thank you very much for staying with us, and join us tomorrow at 10:30 for a fresh edition of the program. I'm Yori Folani. Bye-bye for now.